This is Win News.
Tonight, fears for the structural integrity of the Hazelwood mine. Calls for more emergency relief grants for smoke-affected residents. And Sarah Trainor's parents present a cheque to KidSafe Victoria. Good evening, I'm Bruce Roberts. Also tonight, the fight to save the Australian Tax Office in sale. Victoria's Fire Services Commissioner admits he's really concerned about the integrity of the Hazelwood mine. Craig Lapsley says measures are in place to protect the safety of firefighters. Authorities are also being criticised over information being given to the public about the smoke that continues to blanket the Latrobe Valley.
Fire came within metres of the Hazelwood power station. Some old conveyor belts were burnt and generation was reduced by 20%, but all key infrastructure was saved.
An extremely good save by firefighters.
Potentially we would have lost the coal bunker, and once the coal bunker is lost, the power station stops operation.
That's thanks to the preparedness of crews waiting outside the mine.
At one stage we had a couple of tankers got bogged in the grass fire, and a bit of quick action from the mine's dozers put a brake around them and protected them.
Of major concern is the integrity of the mine and the impact that could have on infrastructure, including the Princess Freeway.
I am really concerned about the integrity of that mine. The more water we put in, one of the constant things we talk about is the safety of our firefighters. And the fact is that as we put water in, we potentially erode parts of it.
We've already got one exclusion zone to the south where potentially we've got a bit of slippage.
We do not want a landslide in that mine that buries a fire truck or compromises the safety of a firefighter.
Smoke from the mine continues to blanket Morwell and surrounds. Of primary concern is the small particle PM 2.5, which can't be seen but has been recorded at up to 60 times national advisory levels.
This is very poor air quality.
Victoria's Chief Health Officer stopped short of guaranteeing there'd be no long-term health effects.
We're continuing to talk to national and international experts on this to make sure that they're giving us, or that we're getting the very best possible advice on this.
Dr Rosemary Lester says 3 weeks is still considered short-term exposure, but couldn't confirm when it becomes long-term. She says the short-term health effects of both PM 2.5 and carbon monoxide are the major concern, particularly on vulnerable groups.
Primary concern we have about pregnant women and unborn babies is carbon monoxide, because we know that that is harmful to developing brains.
But Dr Lester says carbon monoxide levels aren't high enough in Morwell to spark concern.
There's no need for pregnant women in the town of Morwell to be concerned.
They've fallen well short of the 27 parts per million that would trigger an evacuation.
Peaked at 14 for a short period of time.
Having made significant progress and lost little ground to the fires yesterday, authorities remain confident.
This is the best case scenario, is 14 days. We know, and if you talk to some of the old miners, they'll say there's been fires that have been underground for time.
Brooke Van Newton, Win News.
There are calls tonight for additional emergency relief grants to be made available to smoke-affected Latrobe Valley residents. The government and the opposition had plenty to say today as the Premier visited the area for the second time since the fires started 2 weeks ago.
As smoke and ash continues to shroud the streets of Morwell for the third week, more criticism has emerged on the state government's response.
The department and the government need to be coordinating this response rather than leaving the community to fend for themselves.
The Shadow Minister says information on emergency relief grants is not readily available to the public.
The government needs to make it clear if there is emergency relief grants available, what the grants are, who is eligible for them and how they go about applying for them.
Residents who are adversely affected by the smoke and ash, I urge them to contact the Department of Human Services on the 1800 number, which is widely available.
The grant available through the DHS offers $500 for residents who fit a specific set of criteria. The Premier says additional emergency relief funding will not be issued. However, other options are being explored.
We're looking at additional respite opportunities over the weekend.
The state is now calling on the wider community to step in.
Volunteer their perhaps houses, their homes, particularly their holiday homes. It's not school holidays at the moment, and many of those homes may be sitting empty, and here's a good chance for them to perhaps volunteer those for people who want a break.
Alexandria Zadzimarkis, Win News.
Mounting health fears in Morwell amid warnings the Hazelwood coal fire may burn for months. Good evening, Ian Henderson with ABC News. Victoria's fire chief has conceded the mine fire that's choking Morwell could take months rather than weeks to put out. There's growing anger in Morwell about the possible long-term health and economic impacts of the smoke pollution. And as Alison Savage reports, locals are gauging support for a possible class action.
Morwell residents say they've had enough.
We are in the dark. We don't know what's going on.
No one knows what it's going to do to our long-term health.
They've been living with smoke, fumes and falling ash from the Hazelwood mine fire since February 9. Firefighters had hoped to have the fire out within a fortnight, but now concede it could take months.
It's got the potential. It's got the potential to be that. This is the best case scenario, is 14 days.
Hot and windy weather forecast for next Wednesday and Thursday could set the effort back further. Female ambulance and police officers have been warned to stay away from the front line of the fire if they're pregnant or trying to conceive, but authorities are adamant there's no risk to the general public and it's still unlikely Morwell will be evacuated.
We've been keeping a very close eye on the carbon monoxide and that has not been a level of concern, which is good.
Healthy residents are being told they won't suffer any health problems from short-term exposure to the fine particles in the smoke, but the state's chief health officer was unable to say what would be considered long-term exposure.
Well, look, that's something that we're continuing to take advice from national and international experts on.
Council workers have been going door to door in Morwell to check how residents are coping. Hundreds of locals are expected to go to a protest meeting in Morwell on Sunday, where they'll test whether there's support for a potential class action against the mine's owner, GDF Suez.
We're going to collect data to find out whose businesses are suffering and how much they're losing and what are the health issues.
The member for Morwell, Russell North, is critical of the initial handling of the crisis.
If you ask me if the response was too slow, I have to agree with that because that's exactly what the community is feeling. Do we need to do more? Absolutely we do.
Vic Road says it's been monitoring the Princes Freeway, which runs close to where the fire is burning, and hasn't recorded any instability. Alison Savage, ABC News, Morwell.
Angry Morwell residents suffering from the Hazelwood coal mine fire are considering legal action, accusing authorities of playing down its dangers. Alexis Daish has the latest.
A town of 14,000 people suffering at the hands of arson. The Hazelwood coal mine fire has been burning for 18 days. Residents say its billowing toxic smoke has taken a turn for the worse over the last 24 hours.
All the time, especially when it's a southerly wind. You feel smoke and cough and sick all the time.
Authorities today said this blaze could burn for months, warning residents the longer it goes, the more damage to their health.
Let's get focused on the health issues, and I think the health issues are front and centre. Smoke, carbon monoxide and ash. They are the three key things.
We know that the fine particles in the smoke can get down into the lungs, and we know that the people who are most vulnerable to these effects are people with pre-existing heart and lung conditions, children, the elderly.
88-year-old Nona Broderick is planning to evacuate.
It's one of the hardest parts. We just don't know what we're breathing. This is the whole thing.
One of many Morwell locals who says there's been little communication about the fire's impact on their town.
They're scared and they're starting to get annoyed now, like it was going to be over in 2 weeks, it's going to be over in another 2 weeks.
Locals are considering a class action for health costs and business losses.
We're probably 30% maybe down. So, which is a lot in anyone's figures, isn't it?
The more dangerous threat to residents is one you can't actually see, carbon monoxide. And if the levels of this toxic gas continue climbing here in Morwell, authorities may have to evacuate the entire town. Paramedics are using a community hall to assess locals like asthmatic Brody.
And again?
While firefighters continue battling the toxic blaze, paying the price for an arsonist on the run.
Live now to Alexis Daish in Morwell. Alexis, what are the challenges that firefighters are facing?
Good evening, Pete. Well, because this fire could burn for so many more weeks, the biggest risk is the potential for some sort of a landslide inside the coal mine. That's because there's obviously coals burning, creating cavities, and there's also lots of water dousing the fire inside the coal mine as well. So, look, a very delicate but urgent firefight ahead as police continue their hunt for the person responsible for lighting this fire. Back to you.
Thanks, Lexi.